This is Mac Pritchard, founder of Mac's List. I've interviewed more than 500 career experts since Find Your Dream Job started in 2015. The advice these guests shared remains as valuable as ever. So every other week, we're publishing one of our most popular conversations. Here's a classic episode I think you'll enjoy. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Mac's List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps people find fulfilling careers. Every Wednesday on this show, I interview a career expert. We discuss the tools you need to find the work you want. This week, I'm talking to Rachel Beohm about how to own the room in a job interview. Rachel is an executive coach and speaker. She helps her clients with public speaking, negotiation, and job interviews. And she joins us today in person in the Mac's List studio in Portland, Oregon. Rachel, welcome to the show. Walking into a job interview is scary for most of us. What's the most important step listeners can take before going through that door?
Thank you, Mac. It's a pleasure to be here. You're right. Walking into a job interview can be a very daunting proposition. It's kind of like going on a blind date. You have a lot of future riding on this potentially, and it can be very nerve-wracking. So I would say the number one thing for people to keep in mind is to prepare themselves mentally before they go into a job interview. Take a moment to breathe and remind yourself who you are and how you want to be in that interview. It's important, of course, to think about what you want to say, prepare for the potential questions you're going to get and that sort of thing. And yet often I find job seekers, when I coach them, they have these scripts that they come with. They have canned answers to the questions, and they want to get them all out. And sometimes they forget to just be in the moment. And so often having a word in mind of how you just want to be in that interview helps a lot.
And tell us, Rachel, when you talk about owning the room, what does that mean? This isn't about swaggering or being arrogant or telling people what to do. What tell us more about what you mean when you say it's possible for people to own that room.
I'm glad you brought up that word arrogant. It's a word that I use frequently because that is exactly what I don't want to be a proponent of. There's a fine line there between confidence and owning your space and being present and projecting and communicating presence versus being arrogant. So owning the room simply means being comfortable in the space and claiming that entire space for your presence. It has to do with being grounded and being willing to be seen and showing up in a way that is powerful.
And what does that look like to the interviewer or perhaps a panel of interviewers who are sitting on the other side of the table?
Well, that again is an important distinction there between one interviewer and a whole panel. When you're one-on-one, it has to do with giving that person your attention, as well as though not being so closed in your own little bubble that you have no idea what else is going on in the room. That's exceptionally important when you're in a panel interview. Often, one person will ask the question and the interviewee then answers that person and forgets that there's a whole other series of people there. So owning the room has to do with being aware of the entire space, speaking to everyone that's on the panel, even though one person may have been the questioner in that case, and relating to everyone.
And how do you do that, Rachel? You're sitting there in a chair, perhaps, and there are perhaps 2, 3, 4, or 5 people on the other side of the table. How do you make that connection with one or more folks?
The first step is to practice before you get there with being aware of a space that's bigger than that little space bubble that we tend to carry around, especially nowadays. We're all on our phones all the time. And so often the amount of space we're aware of is just that short little distance between us and our phone screens. And so just practicing opening up that sense of space, whether or not you're with another person, helps a lot when you're actually in a stressful situation to have a bigger sense of space and not just be in this. It's daunting if you're not used to doing that, and then all of a sudden you try to do it when you're stressed or nervous. It's a lot harder. So practice it when you're not stressed. I like to do it at the grocery store. That's my favorite place to walk in and just be like, I'm owning this store today. And it's amazing how people relate to you differently when you have a big sense of space like that. So that'd be the first thing I say. And then when you get into the room, actually look at it. Look at the space, the corners of the room, and see how big it is and where you are in relation to those people and the walls and the ceiling, and be willing to own that space. And then, of course, make eye contact with all the people that are there. You don't have to make eye contact with them to claim the space, but it's a good place to start.
So I can imagine listeners are at home. There are any number of people. It's Friday. They've got an interview on Monday, and they're getting ready. And so they're going to go shopping this weekend to that grocery store. How do you own the grocery store and translate that into what you need to take into the interview room on Monday?
Owning the space really has to do with being, first of all, aware of it, like I said, and then secondly, sending your energy out to fill it. So the thing to keep in mind here is that it does take a great deal of energy to fill a space with your presence. So on the day of the interview, that might not be a good time to practice in that morning, but the day before would be excellent. So you go grocery shopping on Sunday, you walk in and simply being aware of how big that huge grocery store is and opening up your body language and sending your energy to all four corners. It's a little woo, but when you try it or when you see it, you can tell in other people how much space they are aware of and how much they are claiming. And then on the day of the interview, when you go in, I suggest keeping quiet, physically quiet. And then when you walk in, opening that up and taking in that space.
Okay. What's your best tip for sharing that energy when you walk into that room and sending that energy out? How can people do that?
Sharing the energy. Let's see. I would again make eye contact with everyone. That's kind of a basic tip, and smile. And then I would say the open body language really, really helps. It's if you're nervous or anxious, it's natural to want to pull in and be small. That's, your fight or flight or freeze response. Make yourself as small as possible. But that doesn't communicate confidence. It communicates that you feel threatened. And it's natural to feel threatened when you go into a job interview. Like I said, there's a lot on the line sometimes. So instead, if you can open up your shoulders, put your shoulders back a little bit, stand up tall, feel both feet on the ground, and simply keep your arms away from, no crossed arms, don't put them in your pockets, but have them open. Available to you to move around when you're gesturing. Those types of things really communicate an openness, which then communicates confidence.
Any tips for stretches or exercises that can both limber you up and help you show that energy that you say is so important?
Absolutely. There are lots of yoga poses out there that do that. One of the things that I like to do with clients is we'll stand up and I'll just have them put their arms to their sides and then reach out in front of them and then reach up as high as they can. And then we'll go through it numerous times, and each time we'll just be aware of greater senses of space. So reaching out in front while looking at the wall in front of you, and then reaching up to the sky while looking at the ceiling. And then even going beyond, reach out in front and what's on the other side of that wall? Reach up to the ceiling, what's beyond the ceiling? And you will feel this sense of openness and energy kind of go through you and open up that space.
So you're not slamming down 2 or 3 espressos before you walk into the room, or maybe having a candy bar.
No. You could do that. That might lead to jitters as opposed to actual grounded confidence and power, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I know from your articles, you say rituals are an important part of preparation. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that kind of rituals that you recommend people pay attention to before they walk into that interview room, Rachel?
Sure. There are several things that I do, for example, before presentation that I find really help me get grounded and also prepare for that. And for different people, it's different things. You have to find something that you can incorporate that feels natural to you and also works. But deep breathing is one that I think probably everyone can benefit from. And I don't just mean before you walk into the door, you take a nice deep breath, but actually taking a few minutes to close your eyes and practice that deep diaphragmatic breathing where you can actually see your abdomen going in and out. That will provide you with chemicals of calmness, and it releases hormones that, the adrenaline hormones. So that's one. Another one are power poses. If you're familiar with Amy Cuddy's power poses, I do those before presentations. And you can do it in the bathroom. You can do it at home before you leave or whatnot. All of these are things that are good to practice daily, I would say, while you're in a job search. It helps keep your mind sharp and also your mood, because it can get demoralizing after a while if you've had a few rejections. And these are things that help your mental health as well as your preparation for the specific interview.
Good. Well, I want to talk more about preparation because we haven't talked about mindset, and I want to touch on that, but we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Rachel Beohm. We're back in the Max List studio, and I'm talking with Rachel Beohm. She's an executive coach and speaker. Rachel, before the break, we were talking about how to own the room during a job interview, and you gave some very practical tips about stretches and rituals and other steps that people can take before coming into that conversation with an employer. But I also want to touch on mindset because I know, again, from your articles that is an important factor. Could you talk more about what you mean by mindset and why that matters in helping someone both get ready and own that job or own that room during a job interview?
Absolutely. Own the job is actually a good slip there, because I would say that's part of it is often job seekers, they go into an interview and they see it as an interrogation. They see it very much as a one-way street that they're sort of on. It's an evaluation, not only of their job skills, but so often they see it as an evaluation of who they are as a person, their self-worth, like their whole identity is on the line here as they're going into this job interview. And so a couple of things that come to mind immediately. One is simply being willing to let this be a slice of your life and not the whole be-all, end-all, I'm a failure at everything if I don't get a job offer, I don't get moved to the next round. Putting it in context really helps. That's part of the mindset piece. Another thing is remembering that it's a conversation. It's not a one-way interrogation. And you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. What if, they offer you the job and it's awful and you hate it? I mean, you have to find out whether or not this is a place you want to work, just as much as they're finding out whether or not you're someone they would like to have working for them. And on top of that, I would say demonstrating or thinking about how you would be if you already had the job. So do you belong there? Can you walk into that room and sit down as if you belong there? Because someday you might. Someday that might be where you live or work. Well, the way we live and work so much nowadays, sometimes it's the same thing. But you
see your point.
Yeah, right. You might be working there. So can you show up as someone who belongs? And that starts in the mind, absolutely.
I love those points because you're right. So many people, particularly at the start of their career,
right.
Walk into that room and they think it is an interrogation, not a conversation. Right. And I'm thinking too, Rachel, about people who have been looking for a long time. Mm-hmm. They're getting discouraged. What's your advice about how to address that discouragement and in order to to display the kind of confidence and energy that is going to help somebody own that room?
I think you're right. That is really hard when you've been getting rejection after rejection, or just there aren't a lot of options out there. And then sometimes people walk in, especially if they're changing careers. There are a lot of things that can go into how comfortable a person feels about themselves when they're in that room. So I'd say putting it into context and remembering who you are as a person, what it is about yourself that you value, that can get lost over the course of a job search. It's so easy to think in terms of what employers want, putting your best foot forward, and sometimes it's hard to keep your core self in mind. And so reminding yourself of that, what your values are, what you stand for, who loves you. It should at least be you, right? You love yourself. And if not, that's something to work on, because that's going to carry you through those rough times that come during a job search.
We've talked about the preparation that people you recommend do, and what happens after you walk into that room and you sit down, paying attention to your body language rather. What do you recommend people pay attention to as they look at either the one person or perhaps several interviewers, particularly if they see negative body language, crossed arms or frowns or looks of boredom or people glancing at their watch?
Well, the first thing I always say is you're not a mind reader. So don't read too much into what you see as negative, quote unquote, in other people. Certainly, if you see that, you can try another tack. You can modify your approach a little bit and see if that gets a different reaction. However, there are a lot of people, and I'm one of them, which is why I know this. If they're very focused and they're thinking about what you're saying, they may end up with a furrowed brow, a bit of a frown on their face, type of thing. I've actually had people ask me, were you upset with what I was saying, or was that just thinking face? So I could tell you story after story of people who thought they saw negative body language from someone else, and that's not what it was at all. And in fact, that's happened to me many times. I specifically remember one presentation where there was a lady who was just frowning at me the whole time, and I chose not to let it derail me, but at first it really did. And then afterwards, she was the first person in line to come up and say, "That was so great. That was so important. Thank you so much, blah, blah, blah." It just made an impact. So definitely, if you see consistent negative body language, which I would say like people are shaking their heads or crossing their arms, or especially if there's a baseline shift where it was positive and now it's negative, and then you need to modify your approach to deal with that. But if you don't know the baseline when you're heading into an open room, so don't make up stories. Don't let it derail you if you see negative body language.
And if you need to make that shift, what tips do you have for listeners about how to deal with some negative body language?
Well, the first thing to keep in mind is to actually shift yourself. So if there's a shift in the room, then actually move a little bit in your chair. Just change your posture, whatever, while you kind of glance down maybe and then look back up. It's almost like a break, and it's a fresh start. We're starting over. It's
kind of like hitting the reset button.
Exactly. It's very subtle, and yet it's very effective. So do that, and then come up with a fresh demeanor and move on to, it's sometimes you don't know what you said or did that was wrong, but be ready to answer the next question and get back to the positive.
Okay. And I'm guessing you shouldn't ignore, if it's a small group of people, of that person, you want to try to engage them through eye contact or other forms of body language as well.
Absolutely. Everyone. Yeah. And again, if you have a big sense of space, it makes it a lot easier to peripherally keep everyone in mind. Even though you might not be making eye contact with all of them, they can sense if you're aware of their presence or not.
What about listeners who might be shy or feel awkward, and eye contact can be uncomfortable? And while you've given great tips about things everybody can do, any special advice for introverts or shy people?
Baby steps is what I would say there. And as someone who is highly introverted myself, I can say that it absolutely can be difficult, and yet it also is overcomable. So eye contact is, even if you can make a quick glance at people, you don't have to maintain it for the whole time. In fact, no one does. No one looks at someone else the entire time. It's creepy if you actually do that. So just, give them a glance now and then, especially if you're talking about something positive. That can go a long way. Taking those baby steps, just sitting up a little bit taller, giving a little bit firmer handshake, opening up a little bit, those go a long way.
What about voice, Rachel? It matters a lot, and I know some people are concerned about upspeak as well. Talk to our listeners about voice, why it matters, and what they should pay attention to.
Absolutely. So upspeak or uptalk, as it is sometimes referred to, is when you curl your voice up at the ends of your statements all the time. Even when you're not asking a question, it sounds like you're asking a question like that. And it can be very annoying, but many, many people do it. And it diminishes your credibility. When you're in a job interview, certainly there are appropriate times when you want to curl your voice up at the ends of statements, for example, if you are actually asking a question. But in general, when you are stating your expertise, when you're stating why you're a good candidate for the position, you want to have what I refer to as the authoritative voice pattern, which curls down at the ends of statements. And what that says is this is not negotiable. It's not up for debate. I'm not asking for your input. I'm just telling you like it is. I'm a good candidate for this position. Sounds a lot better than I'm a good candidate for this position.
And how do people get good at that? Is it practice again? Is that what matters?
Yes. So all these things that I'm talking about here are physical skills. So on the one hand, they make a huge impact. Even just the smallest little changes can make a big impact in how you come across to others. However, because there's physical skills, sometimes all it takes is awareness and people can shift them immediately. Other times, if there are deeply ingrained habits, it takes a little bit of time. So if this is Friday and you have a job interview on Monday, choose one and work on it all weekend, but don't try and do them all because that's too much. Over the course of your job search, which, often lasts a few months, maybe try one per week, but it does take practice. I often suggest that people stand in front of the mirror and say statements such as introducing themselves, answers to questions, and actually watch themselves in the mirror while they curl their voice down.
What about role playing? Do you recommend that?
Absolutely.
Before someone walks into an interview room?
Absolutely. As much practice as you can get, do it. And in fact, and this is one of the things that I've put in some of my articles and is also in the guide that I have been working on, practice out loud as much as you can. Even if you don't have someone to do a mock interview with, if you can go through your questions or even just introducing yourself out loud, when you hear your own voice, first of all, it gets the content into your head better. You're using more of your senses, using your body in a different way. And you also get a chance to hear what it actually sounds like, because the way it sounds in our head isn't always the way it sounds in real life.
We've talked about body language. What are other forms of nonverbal communication that listeners should pay attention to in order to own that room?
Well, body language is a huge one, and voice tone. We've talked about that also, as well as claiming space and being open. I've also mentioned breathing, though I haven't mentioned it in terms of nonverbal communication, but the way that you breathe impacts every other aspect of your nonverbals. It affects the way you move, it affects your posture, and it very much affects your tone of voice. So if you're not breathing well because you're stressed and nervous and your breathing is tight, that is going to make your voice sound, you can try and be authoritative, like I said, and it's going to come across as being kind of stressed or angry. And then that upspeak is going to come across as even more whiny and worried. So breathing deeply really adds to your tone of voice.
We talked about what people should do before they walk into the interview room, and you shared tips for how they should behave. When you're getting ready to leave, any special advice there about what people can do to show that confidence and ownership?
I would say in terms of body language, it's the same throughout, is being grounded, standing up straight, opening up that body language, and then, of course, firm handshake and smiling and eye contact and all those things go a long way towards showing that you have the confidence to be there. Basically, what you're saying is, I'm comfortable here.
Okay. Well, terrific advice. Now, Rachel, tell our listeners what's next for you.
Well, in addition to my one-on-one coaching that I do here in Portland and the usual speaking gigs that I've got going around, I have also been working on some webinars. One of them is done. The other one is in process, and I just haven't gotten them up on the website yet, but hopefully by the end of the year. I have one for networking for introverts and one on how to deal with anger in the workplace, whether you're the recipient or the feeler of it.
Good. Well, I know people can learn more about you, your company, and your services by visiting your website, rachelbeohm.com. And of course, we'll be sure to include that in the show notes and the website article about this interview. Now, Rachel, you've shared a lot of great tips today. What's the one thing you hope our audience will remember about how to own the room during a job interview?
I have shared a lot of tips, and sometimes that can be overwhelming for people. They think they have all these things they need to do. So what I would say is be yourself, but be the best version of yourself that you can be. Be the biggest, boldest, most confident version of you that there is.
Okay, so go big or go home.
Yeah, yes.
Well, terrific. Well, Rachel, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this classic episode of Find Your Dream Job. You can support our show and help others find it by leaving a review and rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a question or a suggestion? Email me at mac@maxlist.org or connect with me on LinkedIn. To make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at maxlist.org/podcasts. This show is produced by MaxList. The production team for this episode included Lisa Kislenberry Anderson, Jessica Black, Susan Thornton Huff, Dawn Mole, Megan Hattie Stahl, and Will Watts. Our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week.